1-minute debates. Kenny MacAskill.
Thank you, Mr Davis. A pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'd like to thank the Minister for her courtesy and consideration in a discussion yesterday. Scots were told in 2014 that the benefit of being in the UK was the pooling and sharing that it afforded. Assets and resources pooled and then shared out across the nations. The broad shoulders of the Union supposedly providing fairly for all. But how's that working out? The King's speech had at its heart Scottish oil and gas, the extent of which was hidden from the Scottish people when it was discovered, as the Macron report detailed. Ever since then, its demise predicted and foretold. By 2014, it was apparently all gone, and Scotland left with only a burden. Now, Scottish oil's to save the UK economy. Scots can only look with envy at Norway, with its society and economy transformed by a resource, the benefit of which has been denied us. Some nations discovered oil and saw the desert bloom. Scotland discovered oil and saw a huge part of our land turned into an industrial desert. Pooling and sharing? I don't think so. Now another natural bounty has blessed our land. Renewable energy. Clean, infinite, and what our world, not just our land, needs as part of a just transition from fossil fuels. Let's consider the scale of the bounty. Scotland produces a quarter of the UK's renewable energy and has the potential to produce much, much more. Offshore wind, as well as other forms of energy, whether tidal, wave or onshore, ensure that. Scotland's share of Europe's offshore wind capacity has reduced, but because of improved technologies and opportunities in other countries. But Scotland is still the envy of other nations. Naysayers who talk this bounty down are the same who predicted the demise of our oil. In 2009, only 27% of Scotland's electricity came from renewables. By 2020, the equivalent of 97.4% of Scotland's gross electricity consumption was from them. 3 years on, it'll be even greater. And that's before offshore wind comes on stream in scale, as now it's still minimal. But the scale of what's coming from offshore is massive. That's confirmed by the then-named Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, estimating that in 2021, Scotland exported 35 terawatt-hours of electricity south. By 2030, it's to increase to 124 terawatt-hours. Now, I struggled to understand what a terawatt was. For those who are similarly afflicted, let me clarify that 1 terawatt is 1 billion kilowatts. Let's put that in context. The average Scottish household uses just over 3,200 kilowatt-hours per annum. And let's remind ourselves that it's anticipated by 2030, Scotland will be sending south 124 terawatt-hours, or 124 billion kilowatt-hours south. That's enough to power 37.6 million homes, the equivalent of powering Scotland's 2.5 million homes almost 15 times over. That's year on year and growing. That's the scale of Scotland's resource. Let's look at how it's pooled and how it's shared. By all means.
Absolutely compelling case for Scotland. Can I suggest as well, and to the Minister when the Honourable Lady is here, that there's a compelling case for Northern Ireland. We haven't had the opportunity to advance to the same level of Scotland. We wish to do so. Does the Honourable Gentleman agree that if we're going to move forward, then there has to be a joint strategy for all of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, because we can all play our part, we must all play our part, and I envy what Scotland has done. We want to do the same.
Well, I prefer an independent strategy because I look at what Norway and Denmark are doing and I prefer that. But what I do concede to the member is that Northern Ireland is frequently ignored from this because so much of the gas grid is a pan-British island or Great Britain rather than across the Irish Sea. Firstly, the pooling. I've detailed the 35 terawatt-hours rising to 124 terawatt-hours. But what I haven't explained is that no payments received for that resource. The energy is sent south, but there's no financial return to Scotland. Besides not paying anything for it, there are now efforts ongoing to take it directly south. Neither a bobby nor a pretty please being given for that. Off south it's to go, and for no payment. The Eastern HVDC, that's high voltage direct current subsea transmission cables, also referred to as the Eastern Green Links project, the longest HVDC cables to be laid in the UK, they'll run from Peterhead to Redcar and Torness to Drax. It's estimated that these links will take 5 terawatt-hours or 5 billion kilowatt-hours of Scotland's renewable energy resource south. Again, no payment. Additionally, the proposed Berwick Bank offshore wind farm in the Firth of Forth, which alone will produce sufficient energy to supply more households than Scotland possesses, but a cable is proposed to be laid taking 40% of its energy directly south. Again, no payment. But what about the sharing? Where's the benefit from the supposed broad shoulders of the Union? Where's the return for what we contribute? A recent question to the now Department for Energy Security and Net Zero asked whether consideration would be given to crediting domestic energy users in the localities where energy is produced and landed. After all, it's being produced on or offshore here. You might have thought that it would see some credit or even benefit accrue to Scotland. It might even be cheaper. But no, the answer was simply it's a matter for Ofgem. But we know they're a creature of statute. They can only act within their set powers or as directed by ministers. No such rules exist, and no directions being given. The energy is not only to go south for no payment, but no benefit is to accrue to Scotland from it. There's talk of payments to those facing having pylons placed near them. But what about those who live in the land where the energy is being produced? Winter will soon be upon us. The weather's changing and the temperature's falling. The cold's being felt and the need to heat homes increasing. And it's not simply heat, but power that's required. Access to energy, and especially electricity, is needed not just to keep the cold at bay. It's required by the mother to wash her children's clothes, keeping them clean and upholding the standards she seeks to maintain. By the parent seeking to power up an iPad or laptop to help their child's education and advance their life chances. By the worker charging their phone, allowing them to find employment or do the additional hours this government wants, or which they require simply to keep body and soul together. It's even also more shamefully required by the sick, whether someone on dialysis or recovering from cancer. Immune systems are weakened, and warmth and power are a necessity for life, not a luxury for living. Yet despite Scotland being energy rich, our people are fuel poor. Already, over a third of Scots have been assessed as being in fuel poverty. Even more shamefully, almost a quarter are in extreme fuel poverty, by all means.
Thank you very much for the honourable member for this debate. Households living in rural areas have the highest fuel poverty rate, 15.9% in 2022, and I'm concerned that this will continue into 2024 if the government doesn't act. Somerton, through my constituency, has an estimated 13,060 homes off the gas grid who rely on alternative sources of fuel. So would the honourable member agree that we should accelerate the deployment of renewable power, provide more funding and remove the government restrictions on solar and wind?
Well, I certainly agree that those off the gas grid are prejudiced. It's not those simply rural areas for the members, or indeed my own in the lee of the Lammermuirs, but those in urban areas, often urban deprived areas, who are in multi-storey flats and where gas is not available and the heating system is expensive. But the numbers I was given are historic, and they're only going to rise if they've not already risen. After all, statistics from the Scottish Ambulance Service for last winter's hypothermic call-outs were shameful. But that's likely to be the baseline, and worse could follow. Energy prices may have fallen along with the energy price cap, but according to National Energy Action, the average household is still paying £800 more for heat and power than before the energy crisis started. And this, when a cost of living crisis has subsumed the energy price crisis. Costs will still be higher this year than last, when there was support given to reduce bills. It's not just the big energy companies making money out of others' misery. The Treasury made money through VAT on increased bills. That amounted to £1.1 billion in the UK and £96 million in Scotland. Cash is there. It's who's got it or not got it that's the issue. Scotland's geographically further north and our climate's colder and damper than other parts of the UK. It makes access to heat and power even more essential. Winters can be cruel and the hardship in northern parts extreme. Let's examine the sharing. After all, we're told pooling and sharing is the benefit of the Union. When there's so much renewable energy being produced in Scotland, why are costs so high? Where's the social tariff that was alluded to by government and which even many suppliers support? It could be paid for out of general taxation. Shared, that is, but no. The vulnerable are again left to struggle this winter. Where's the credit to reduce costs more generally, as I've mentioned? People can see the turbines turning or the towers rising from their doors in my constituency, but are unable to heat their homes. Moreover, why are costs greater in Scotland, the nation providing more energy than it has households? I wrote to Ofgem, asking them to detail the standing charges for electricity imposed on consumers in Scotland and in England. They've provided the answer for the costs imposed up until this December, but there's no sign of any variation coming, so it will run and run, and so will the injustice. The consultation not closing until January and winter has passed. Scotland's divided into two zones, northern and southern. SSE and Scottish Power Energy Networks, roughly the Highlands and the Lowlands. England into North West, Southern and London. What the answer disclosed was that both Scottish zones were charged more, and often substantially more than regions south of the border. That, whether standard credit, direct debit or prepayment meter. The differential runs across all forms of charging. Let me detail the situation for those on prepayment meters. They are, after all, who should be benefiting most from Scotland's energy which is being pooled. Their needs are invariably greatest, and this bounty should be prioritised towards them, although similar benefits should apply equally across Scotland, irrespective of payment method, and could also be applied across the UK. Many are now counting their ability to access heat and power in pounds, if not pence. It's not 50p or a pound for the meter, but what they calculate that they can afford to use. It's why we have the weasel phrase of self-disconnection. It's not personal choice, it's imposed cruelty. Let's look at standing charges for electricity, including VAT. It's 69 pence per day in southern Scotland, 66p in northern Scotland, yet lower in England and only 46p in London. Annually, per annum, it means those on prepayment meters standing charges on average are £251.75 in southern Scotland, £241.92 in northern Scotland, yet only £166.10 in London. That's not my figures, that's Ofgem's. So we've seen the pooling, and now we're seeing the sharing. We're giving, but not receiving. We produce the energy, and our people, and especially the poorest Scots, are charged more for it. The broad shoulders of the unions the claim, sleight of hand, the reality, as the bounty's taken, yet higher costs are imposed. Now, as I begin to conclude on the costs of energy and energy charges with the perversity of energy-rich Scotland, yet fuel-poor Scots, I make my first remarks to the Scottish Government. They've sold off Scotland cheap and failed to stand up for Scotland. I'm minded of the words from the Proclaimer's song, Cap in Hand. We fight when they ask us. We boast, then we cover. We beg for a piece of what's already ours. As the song says, I can't understand why we let someone else rule our land, cap in hand. Hear, hear. It's time they stood up for our land on energy and electricity prices. Meanwhile, I ask the Minister, is energy policies reserved to the UK? Where's the pooling and sharing? There's talk of payments to those having pylons nearby. But what about those where the energy is produced? Will there be a social tariff for the vulnerable this year? Ofgem's appointed by this government and accountable to them. They are carrying out a welcome, if long overdue, review on standing charges. But as I said, submissions don't close until late January. Too late for this winter. Will the Minister direct Ofgem that standing charges be abolished, as many suppliers argue? As National Energy Action State, how can it be right that someone that can't afford any energy pays the same as someone in a mansion? It's an energy poll tax and equally unjust. Failing that, will she ensure that standing charges are at least equalised across the UK, rather than seeing Scotland pool its energy and yet share our higher charges? In summary, will she end the perversity of the land that produces the energy, seeing its people and its poorest paying most for that energy? Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the cost of energy and energy charges. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to thank the honourable gentleman for what was, I think, a passionate and informative speech. And I would just, at the start of this conversation, like to say from a renewable energy point of view, clearly that doesn't fit into my portfolio. But if there's anything that doesn't, I'm able to answer, then obviously I will try and find the answers out following subsequently in some written information, if that's okay. Thank you. So, first of all, the government has been clear on the importance of protecting energy consumers, and I take my role as Minister for Energy and Consumers and Affordability incredibly seriously. And that is why I meet frequently with energy suppliers and also the regulator to remind them of their obligations and my expectations, that they will do all they can to support the customers, especially the most vulnerable, this winter and beyond. In response to the wholesale energy price challenge caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year, the government acted swiftly to provide support to UK households and businesses, delivering almost £40 billion of energy bills support through different schemes from October 2022, and also continues to stand firmly behind energy consumers. And for those who are... Of course I will.
Richard Ford.
I thank very much the Minister for giving way. And while I think our constituents are very grateful for that £40 billion of subsidy that was given across the cold winter last year, does she agree with me that that would not have been necessary? It would not have been necessary to spend that £40 billion of taxpayers' money if we'd carried on insulating homes at the rate that we had been doing up until Liberal Democrats left government in 2015.
Yeah.
Minister.
Thank you, and thank you, the Honourable Gentleman, for the intervention. Of course, the fact is that we had a cost of living crisis, mainly, as I have pointed out, due to Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine, and that was the situation that we found ourselves in. But for households in fuel poverty, we've targeted support such as £150 directly off energy bills through the Warm Home Discount, which last year we increased in value and extended to around 3 million households. And we are also tackling the root problem through our energy efficiency schemes. We're looking at ways to make the Warm Home Discount more flexible at the moment, and also to help respond to future increased pressures on consumers' bills and continue to monitor energy bills and keep options under review. And I also encourage... Of course I will.
Carla Lockwood.
For giving way. Figures released by the utility regulator in Northern Ireland show that SMEs in Northern Ireland are paying almost 10 pence per kilowatt more than a typical EU price or the rest of the UK. Does the Minister agree that this places Northern Ireland businesses at a competitive disadvantage, particularly given the land border with the Republic of Ireland? And would the Minister agree that further support measures need put in place, particularly for small to medium enterprise businesses?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to put up for the Honourable Lady, I had a meeting yesterday with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, and we're discussing issues around these very particular issues. So you have my assurance that those discussions are always mindful and top of my thoughts. I would also encourage all members to make their constituents aware of the government's It All Adds Up campaign, which shows just simple measures as to how we can save people money off their energy bills this winter. I know that the matter of standing charges is something that the Honourable Member has a particular interest, as we very gracefully discussed with me yesterday. And standing charges are a matter for Ofgem. And I am pleased to share that last week Ofgem published a call for input on standing charges to look at how they are applied to energy bills and what alternatives could be considered. And the standing charge is used to recover the costs required to provide vital energy companies services, including providing and maintaining the wires, pipes and cables that deliver power to a customer's door. And if the standing charge were scrapped, as the Honourable Member suggests, suppliers would still have to recover reasonable costs in other ways, which would mean charging a higher price for every unit of power used. And this could have significant consequences on some categories of vulnerable customers, for example, those without high energy use due to using medical equipment, as an example, which is one of the reasons why we're working through this very carefully. The standing charge can also vary from region to region, as is pointed out, because of the differing costs associated with transmission and distribution of supplying energy to a particular area. Geographical factors mean it costs more to run the local electricity distribution network in the north of Scotland than elsewhere. And to help protect the north of Scotland consumers from these costs, a government cross-subsidy scheme provides an annual cross-subsidy of some £112 million to that area. It is funded by electricity suppliers from across GB and reduces the electricity distribution charge for a typical North of Scotland household by over £60 a year. The cost-reflective approach means that Scottish consumers actually pay lower charges for the high-voltage transmission network than most consumers in England and Wales. I'm also aware that the Honourable Member is interested in what benefits are available for communities near transmission network infrastructure, especially those in Scotland near to offshore wind facilities. Offshore wind farm developers already provide a range of community benefit packages which are developed in consultation with local communities. For projects based in Scotland, developers follow the Scottish Government's offshore energy good practice principles when creating a community benefit package. However, we want to ensure communities hosting transmission networks infrastructure can benefit from supporting the delivery of cheaper, secure and low-carbon energy for all of Great Britain. And we have therefore consulted on proposals for community benefits. The consultation proposed to introduce voluntary guidance on the appropriate levels and forms of benefits to give communities the knowledge, power and flexibility to decide what benefits they want in consultation with the project developer. The consultation has now closed and we intend to publish a response as soon as we can. Historically, I'd like to come on to prepayment meters. Historically, customers on prepayment meters have paid higher standing charges than direct debit customers, reflecting the higher cost to serve their customers. However, the government is currently subsidising prepayment meter customers through the energy price guarantee to ensure that customers pay no more than their energy than direct debit customers, because that seems the fair thing to do. The support is due to end at the end of March 2024, when the energy price guarantee ends. But Ofgem is due to announce shortly how it will create an enduring replacement to this scheme, so that prepayment meter customers will have that unfair premium that they were paying removed from their bills once and for all. Further, on prepayment meters, the government has worked with Ofgem and the industry to see that the rules extending protection to prepayment meter installations for the most vulnerable consumers have come into effect. And I would like to close by reminding all members that they should encourage their constituents to contact their energy suppliers if they are concerned about their energy bills or ability to pay. Energy suppliers have an obligation to their customers, and Ofgem have also introduced further rules on customer services for this winter. Once again, I would like to thank the Honourable Member sincerely for East Lothian for securing this incredibly important debate. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the cost of energy and